About this movie, Newsweek critic David Ansen says, "I've rarely laughed so much at a movie I generally disliked." Dwayne Burge of The Hollywood Reporter says, "This comedy's warm and soothing nature will give mainstream audiences in these dysfunctional family times a perfect holiday uplift." And Letterboxd user Kanye asks, "What did Marriage Story give us that this movie didn't?" On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of Mrs. Doubtfire.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Hello, Starfighters!
Oh, I knew you'd be doing that.
Podcast is on the way! Of course you knew it. How else do you introduce an episode about Mrs. Doubtfire? It's Ruined Childhoods. I'm Dan. That's John.
Hey, how's it going? I was looking at our list of movies to cover on this podcast that we created when we first started talking about doing this over 3 years ago, 170 episodes ago, whatever. Yeah. And back to back on our list was Back to the Future and Mrs. Doubtfire. And
because when you think of one, you think of the other, naturally.
Well, I mean, it's like, what are the things that we're obviously going to be talking about? And so
Doc
Mrs.
Brown
Doubtfire
takes Daniel Hillard back in time to save his marriage.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Back to the Future lately because it's a movie that I'm showing at in a summer outdoor movie series, and so I had to like purchase the materials and everything, and of course I was like, man, I just bought these on like iTunes or whatever, and it's like I should have just. What's that?
I thought you were going to say that you had to buy a VHS tape for like $75,000. Did you see that about that? Like the VHS copy of Back to the Futures that was like auctioned for like an insane amount of money. I didn't like read all about it, but I imagine it was still in its original wrapping because I'm sure my overplayed VHS copy of Back to the Future is worth nothing.
Yeah. It's not worth the plastic that it's encased within. So, it's really funny, Dan. I could have sworn that
$75,000. Sorry, go ahead.
I could have sworn that you were calling it Back to the Futures, and it made me think about commodities trading and like corn futures, and then that got me thinking about trading
pork
places. Exactly.
Pork bellies.
And so I was like, that'd be a really great sequel for Trading Places, Back to the Futures. Trading Places to Back to the Futures. Anyway,
oh man,
Dan, before we recorded, you told me that you had one more thing, or is that the $75,000 cassette?
No. While we're on that, I wanted like reading about that made me think of the old of the promotion that McDonald's had like back in, I want to say, the early 90s, and it was something where like if you bought a Happy Meal or just like a combo, I guess you could get there was like for $5, and I think it was like Back to the Future, Field of Dreams, and it was a few Universal movies. I'm pretty sure it's the ones that Joaquin Phoenix disguises his porn in Parenthood. No,
Dragnet.
But I'm pretty, and it was like $5 to get. It's like Back to the Future, Field of Dreams. I don't.
While you're clicking and clacking away at the keyboard, I think that you might have mentioned this a little bit on the last episode, but I was thinking about, I think you mentioned the Pizza Hut Back to the Future Part 2, like Book It or whatever, like some like kids meal thing where like you would get some sort of movie tie-in object. And I don't remember, I think I'm trying to remember if it was Back to the Future Part 2 or Teen Wolf 2. which was 87, but there was one where they had these like crazy sunglasses that were like they were very 80s, but also like future cool sunglasses. And I remember that specifically as being a Pizza Hut thing. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think the Teen Wolf 2 had like a paper cutout mask situation.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah, no, the Pizza Hut thing was just that, like, we went to Pizza Hut either before or after seeing Back to the Future 2 to redeem our book it points.
But I think that there was some sort of like promotional tie-in where like you would get some sort of movie object, and
well, it
one of them
make
was
sense
these like
that Back to the Future too, because they Pizza Hut was prominently featured
right
in that.
Yes,
you were saying. Sorry.
No, we're just kind of riffing about
weren't.
fast food and Back to the Future.
So speaking of Back to the Future, I believe I had mentioned the musical, and I saw that the musical will be opening on Broadway next year.
Broadway.
Yep, Broadway. So Back to the Future, the musical, featuring some of the music of Huey Lewis and the News, I'm guessing.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I would have just gone all in and thrown in all of like, the Huey Lewis and the News songs and just made it a jukebox musical. But,
it's what's something that we didn't really talk about on our Back to the Future episode. And for all of you Mrs. Doubtfire heads, don't worry, we'll get to it. But in the Back to the Future episode, we didn't really talk so much about Huey Lewis and the News. We mentioned how Huey Lewis was in a cameo role in Back to the Future, but I don't think that we really talked about the power of love and Huey Lewis's contribution musically to the movie. And it's funny because like the power of love, was it written for the movie, or was it just that like it got brought into the movie as like a, hey, we want a song, what you got? And he was like, how about Power of Love? And then it just became like the Back to the Future like song that was used, because that's what they were using as Marty's Battle of the Bands or talent show or whatever it was song.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just it wasn't just that it was a song on the soundtrack that plays over the end credits or something. It's just that it was in the movie.
So I'm gonna quote here now. Oh, damn ads popping up all over the place. I'm gonna quote, or I'm gonna paraphrase from Rolling Stone, depending on how much of the article I can look at without getting caught in ads here. So in a Rolling Stone feature where they asked Huey to kind of tell the story of the power of love, he did write it specifically for the film. Was approached to write a song. Was told that Michael J. Fox's character was going to be a big says would have been a huge Huey Lewis and the News fan. And here, I'll just read here. Lewis says he was apprehensive at first, telling the trio, that trio being Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, and Bob Gale, he'd never written for a movie before, and adding that he didn't want to have to write a song called Back to the Future, though I guess Back in Time was just fine. But the trio told him they simply wanted one of his own songs and the rocker. So I guess they like wrote the song just like as a Huey Lewis and the News song. And he was
because he just a solid song.
Well, he just said he was like, I'll send you the next thing I write. So
no, that makes perfect sense to me.
It's an awesome song. And
it's an awesome song.
It's, still an awesome song. And it just, I don't know, it takes me back. It's one of those songs that takes me back. Takes me back in time. Like that. St. Elmo's Fire is another one that also I believe the story of of the song St. Elmo's Fire. Well, I'll save it for when we do a St. Elmo's Fire episode.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay, there are two quick things that I want to mention. I'll stay on the Huey Lewis track right now, and then go into something else because I don't want to veer in one direction and have to go right back to another. But one thing that I find really interesting, Dan, is that you are referencing an article in the from Rolling Stone, which is a reference to, Bob Dylan. It's like Rolling Stone magazine is from that, and not to be confused with any association with the band The Rolling Stones. But I feel like the only other band that I can think of that has a name or a tie-in to a publication is Huey Lewis and the News. The News.
Many publications.
The News.
Really, just the news. Well, and I thought you were going to say Time, like Time magazine.
No,
like,
come on.
Because once you get into Time once, you want to get back in time.
So the other thing
yes.
that I wanted to mention, without acknowledging that joke that you just made, is that just over your shoulder, you do have an autographed Michael J. Fox headshot. And I don't know if that was there the last time, but I'm noticing it now.
It was. And I should tell the story because it is a story.
And this is why I did my Huey Lewis bit first.
Yes.
Because I knew there'd be a story.
It's a story of a very kind gesture by a family relative of ours who sadly passed away last year. So this is little tribute here to the spirit, Kenny Bernstein. Kenny lived in was it West Hollywood?
Studio City,
California. Yep, in Hollywood, California. And one of his neighbors in 1987, during an infamous family trip out to California in the summer of 1987, one of his neighbors was Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox and Tracy Pollan, his wife, lived nearby, and of course in a house that had some security, because Michael J. Fox was on one of the hottest shows on TV, had been in one of the biggest movies in recent years, and I guess two if you count Teen Wolf. And so, and I was a fan. I watched Family Ties, and I'd seen Back to the Future by then. And Kenny offered to kind of go. He said he's like, look, if you write Michael J. Fox a letter, and you want to ask him for like an autographed picture or something, I think it was just like write him a letter, and he was like, I'll bring it to his house. So
gotcha.
I written Michael J. Fox a letter, and Kenny brought it over to his house, and there was a security gate, and I guess Kenny went to slip it like between the bars or under the gate, and the alarm went off, and the security camera comes out. A security camera like takes his picture, like noticeably. This is not, modern day, your Ring, your doorbell camera. And so then Kenny wrote a note saying like, look, your security camera took a picture of me. He's like, if you'll autograph a picture of yourself for my cousin, I'll autograph the picture that your camera took of me.
I didn't know that. That's great.
And lo and behold, no, seriously, this is like just one of the sweetest things, and just really, that's how I remember him. That's
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then he ended up getting this picture, and I forget who contacted him. Like, he didn't I don't think he actually met Michael J. Fox. I don't think Michael J. Fox walked it over and delivered it, but so that's how I have a autographed picture, personal. Dear Daniel, all the best, Michael J. Fox. And it's why I sometimes sign off all the best on some emails. Really, I haven't written a letter in a while, but
is it really why you sign off that way?
Well, every now and again, if it's an appropriate sign off for something, I might do. All the best is kind of like in my, it's kind of in my rotation of email sign-offs, you know, best
specifically
regards.
because of Michael J. Fox using that for you.
Because that was I mean, I don't think anyone, like, I was 10 or almost 10. Like, I don't think anyone had ever written me a letter and like said all the best at the end. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. It's like, that's nice. Michael J. Fox just wants the best for me. And,
you know,
I want the best for
Dan,
him.
I sign off. It's funny you say that because I sign off a lot of my emails with, you know, it's like, please let me know what you think. Get back to me whenever you can. Happy bar mitzvah, babe. John. Literally, no one will understand that. So, Dan, why don't you explain it?
Oh, man. Oh, see, now you're just going to have me. Do I have to tell the whole story behind this?
No, let's just say for one reason or another, Dan for his bar mitzvah got a card from Paul and Linda McCartney that said "Happy Bar Mitzvah, babe."
Yes, and yeah, the Paul, like 1/4 of the Beatles, the Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney. So yes, that's another story for another time. So,
yeah.
Like when we do like help.
Yeah, you know, I'd love, you know, I've always been looking for an opportunity to talk about the Blue Meanies. So I'm sure that we can find, a Beatles, maybe do like a Beatles month or something. But
just a heads up, if the Blue Meanies come up, there's going to be wrestling references.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to let me reference Happy Bar Mitzvah, babe.
Happy Bar Mitzvah, babe. And while we're on emails, and here's how we'll wrap this up because it is a last Back to the Future reference. My email signature for the last, I want to say at least 12 years, like kind of my not like the sign off, but just like the little personal information below. And you put like a quote in sometimes. My quote.
Time for me to make like a tree. Get out of here.
No, and get out of here. It is where we're going. We won't need roads.
Ah, that's right. That's right.
Attributed
You've written
to
me
Dr. Emmett
emails,
Brown.
so I do know that.
I have sent you emails, yes. And yeah, it was funny because I actually had to look for an old email. So I was like looking through like old emails. I was using like an old search term because I was looking for an old address. And I saw an email that was from maybe like, I think like 2010. And it had that sign off on it.
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, wow, I've been doing that for a while. So, you know, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, there you go.
So speaking of fixing, I don't know.
So speaking, I was like, where's he gonna go with this?
Speaking of fixing.
How about this? Fuck it, let's talk about Mrs. Doubtfire.
Fuck it, yes, it's time. It's time. It's overdue.
So I'm so excited that we're finally talking about Mrs. Doubtfire. This is a movie that I've always loved. I feel like my fondness for it definitely grew over time. And each time I do watch it, I appreciate different things about it. And I would say that I especially feel that way since the passing of Robin Williams, because this is a performance that he gives that has so much heart in a movie that masquerades itself as a comedy, but it's really a family story that is just like, it has the music to make it feel like a comedy. It has the bits in it to make it feel like the comedy, Robin Williams doing a bunch of different character moments, Robin Williams doing silly voices, Robin Williams with Harvey Firestein doing, Matchmaker, and and those things are wonderful, but beneath it, it's I wouldn't say it's necessarily a drama, but it's certainly a moving family story. And I feel like this movie gets a lot of criticism for the depiction of a person who is a man wearing women's clothing, or I would say masquerading as a woman, but posing as a woman. And I think that it comes under fire for a lot of those kinds of reasons. But it
sounds to me like you doubt that fire.
I doubt that fire, my friend. I doubt that fire. No, I understand where people are coming from, but I do feel like there is a lot of that does have to do with some of the ways in which the editing tells the story and the music that they use. Dude looks like a lady. Papa's got a brand new bag. Like that kind of stuff. I don't know. I feel like it a little bit cheapens
it.
It cheapens it a little bit. So, but I do feel like it still is a solid movie, and I enjoy watching it. I really, really do.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. My kind of relationship with this movie has kind of fluctuated over the years. I saw it when it first came out, like opening night, because I remember the Westfield Rialto being packed. And this was, a Christmas season movie, winter 93. And it comes out after a string of Robin Williams hits. It's like he went back and forth. So his early 90s movies, so like you have Hook and The Fisher King, two movies we've talked about before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One a family adventure film, the other not.
Yeah.
And then the following year, also around the same time, Aladdin and Toys, which, have you ever seen Toys?
I remembered seeing Toys when we rented it from Blockbuster or something, and it didn't sit with me in the same way that his other movies do.
It's a weird, I haven't seen it, I think, since the theater, but I remember it being a very weird movie. Joan Cusack playing like his robot sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then watching Mrs. Doubtfire, I was kind of thinking about like, all right, well, clearly they're this is kind of, I don't want to say capitalizing because that makes it sound cheap, but they're looking to kind of cash in on Robin Williams' family movies.
Right.
And although I actually feel like the template for for like this and Aladdin especially was actually Good Morning Vietnam, because these are the three performances. So Good Morning Vietnam, Aladdin, and Mrs. Doubtfire, where Robin Williams is kind of just doing Robin Williams. And
right, where there's there's moments where it's like, and go ahead and do your thing.
Right. Well, Aladdin, I kind of think it's the whole thing, but
Yeah.
I have issues with Aladdin.
Aladdin.
I have issues. It just, sorry, like as soon as he just becomes Jack Nicholson, it just totally took me out of it. But like Good Morning Vietnam, I thought was spectacular. It's one of my favorites. And it's a spectacular mix of character. Like his stand-up just blended so perfectly with this character that he played very well.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any disputing Robin Williams was an incredibly gifted actor who like more than deserved the Academy Award that he won and the others that he was nominated for. But then so then you have something like Mrs. Doubtfire, and I don't want to go in, I'm not going to go too much into it before the synopsis, but Mrs. Doubtfire is kind of that, like you said, it's a more, I don't want to say more serious film, but it is a more, I think, it is or could be a more sincere film than it ends up, partially because of all, like, dude looks like a lady and all those parts. There are those moments in there that are, I mean, there's other moments that are just, just flat out funny, and he's got all these great one-liners. Like, I remember It was funny because I felt like a few times watching the movie, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw him mouth fuck, and I'm pretty sure, and apparently there's like an R-rated cut of it. There's, because he was,
I think that's been debunked.
Oh, really? Because I would not be. There's a few scenes where he's like with the delivery guy.
I do not think that there's an actual edit. I'm sure that there's footage
Yes.
There's,
yeah. No, I don't think there's like some type of like director's cut that's going to come out next year on the 30th anniversary that's gonna have just like an F-bomb dropping.
Yeah,
Mrs.
it's
Doubtfire.
like this is the cut that Chris Columbus was trying to get through the studio system. And no, I think that there is a really there are some raw emotions in this movie that you only notice if you're, I don't know, paying attention beyond the silliness of it, the run by fruiting of it all, the boobs on fire, the hello, like all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a lot more to it. And I also just want to mention, let's give it up for Sally Field, everybody, who does not get enough credit for how she just knocks it out of the park. And if you also just look at like her filmography at the time, this is just after Soap Dish, and it's just before Forrest Gump. Like, that is quite the sandwich of movies right there. That is the triple decker of dreams.
She's great, and we get some classic.
I have my problems with Forrest Gump. I watched it the other night and I was just like, oh yeah, I think that I think that Forrest Gump is a movie that when in 1994, wait, was it 93 or 94?
Nope, 94.
94. In 1994, there's a lot of like the Zemeckis razzle dazzle of like, oh, look how they did that. And people are still posting TikTok videos like the ping pong ball is all CGI. And it's just like, ooh, ah. And that movie is bad. It's not good.
It's such a really mixed bag. Good. What's funny is it's
a mixed bag.
As I was flipping through this is quick, and I saw that like there was like a clickbait thing of like, Tom Hanks talks about the one role that he couldn't play if they made the movie today, and I thought it was Forrest Gump. It was Philadelphia that he was referring to, but I was like, I was thinking Forrest Gump, like,
and Forrest Gump. I mean, yes, it's obvious things, that about the character of Forrest Gump, but there's just a lot of other stuff where it's just like a woof. I mean, I think that for that movie, the real hero of it is Robin Wright. I think that she's the, you lose sight of her performance sometimes when you're just paying attention to the camera artistry, but watching it now, and I feel like this is a movie that's not meant to be watched in high definition because you see all of the seams, you see all of the, the different presidents' mouths not moving with the words.
You go behind the seams.
You go behind the seams, which is the like special edition of
Mrs. Doubtfire special edition DVD. Yeah. That would only
the
play halfway through.
Behind the Seams edition.
The Behind the Seams edition.
That is 100% true.
But no, getting back to Mrs. Doubtfire, I agree with you that that one thing that I don't think is a problem. I don't think that the plot device of Daniel Hillard, Robin Williams' character, disguising himself as an older woman, I would say if anything is more kind of offensive, it's that like there's no men being considered for this position, and that there's also a, I guess,
transphobic.
There's that transphobic moment of, oh, I don't work with the boys because I used to be one.
Right.
Which, yes. And that's not, I mean, it kind of comes and goes. So
no, I think that is a joke that, in hindsight, they don't think they would have made. And that's not because it was ever an appropriate thing to say. It's just like the awareness of that type of thing is just way more present right now. And
yeah.
We're
aware. We're more aware that people feel like slighted by things like that. And it's not that they didn't then, it's just that people were afraid to say anything. And now it's like, yeah, no, you know what? That really bothers me. And rightfully so. So anyway.
Right. So let me do a little synopsis and we will we'll go ahead and get on into it. Miranda Hillard is I'm going to start again. I'm having a little bit of whiskey, so that's maybe why my tongue is deciding to say different words. Miranda Hillard is a successful interior designer with her own major firm, a gorgeous San Francisco home, 3 incredible kids, and a husband who is unable to shake his morals in the name of keeping a steady job. Miranda's husband, Daniel, takes it all one step too far when he goes against her wishes and throws a birthday party for their son, who is underperforming at school and lost birthday party privileges. Miranda decides to leave Daniel, and the divorce court judge stipulates that Daniel can only see his kids 1 day a week until he can get steady employment and a suitable place to live. Proving to be completely demoralizing to Daniel, this lifestyle becomes more and more difficult. But he sees a window of opportunity when he learns that Miranda is putting an ad in the paper advertising for a housekeeper. Daniel cons his way back into his kids' lives by posing as an older Englishwoman named Mrs. Doubtfire. Meanwhile, he is also holding a job in shipping for a TV station, accidentally impressing the station manager, Jonathan Lundy. Also, Miranda begins to date an old college friend, Stu Dunmire, which is not easy for Daniel to watch up close as Mrs. Doubtfire. Here's where we get to spoiler territory, but this movie came out a long time ago, and it's also
been almost 30
Doubtfire.
years. Yeah.
It all comes to a crescendo when Daniel is double booked both as Mrs. Doubtfire and himself at a restaurant for Miranda's birthday and a meeting with Mr. Lundy. After several drinks, Daniel loses his wits and accidentally reveals Mrs. Doubtfire to Mr. Lundy, but pulls it off by pitching her as a new kids show host. But when his scheme to put pepper in Stu's jambalaya as a prank backfires, Mrs. Doubtfire jumps to the rescue and saves Stu from choking, revealing herself as Daniel, much to the horror of Miranda and their youngest daughter. When the divorce court insists that Daniel can only see his kids while supervised, Miranda sees how utterly destroyed he is, and they come up with an arrangement for him to take the kids for a few hours each day after school, as long as it doesn't interfere with his new life as Mrs. Doubtfire, children's show host extraordinaire. So, of course, we are, skipping past a lot. Clearly, Robin Williams is Daniel and Mrs. Doubtfire. Sally Field is Miranda. Pierce Brosnan is so good as Stu Dunmire.
Yeah.
Harvey Fierstein is Uncle Frank, and Scott Capurro is Aunt Jack, as Daniel says.
Another one that probably wouldn't make the cut these days.
I don't know.
I think it would just be Uncle Frank and Uncle Jack.
Maybe, but we don't know. I feel like from what we can see by their dynamic as a couple, it's them being gay is not as much played for humor as it is to it makes sense in the context of it. And seeing them as each other, I could see him also wanting to go as Aunt Jack a little bit.
Good point. Good point.
Because when Daniel refers to him as Aunt Jack to the kids, he doesn't put on like a weird face or anything.
Right.
It's
very just matter. It's very matter of fact.
Yeah. In
that way, very very cool in that respect.
Totally. Yeah. Lisa Jacob plays Lydia. Matthew Lawrence is Chris, and Mara Wilson is Natalie, the 3 kids. Robert Prosky is Jonathan Lundy. Martin Mull has an appearance in there as Miranda's colleague. Always nice to see Martin Mull completely underutilized.
Just kind of, it's like
just
he was
being
in town
a
and
in a
had
movie.
a day off or something.
Hey, I don't know, but he's wonderful. And so, this movie is it's extraordinary. It is one that it was kind of like an instant classic. As soon as it came out, it was just like Mrs. Doubtfire was just a part of everybody's life. It was just a thing. Everybody knows what it is when you say Mrs. Doubtfire. It is such a peculiar name for a movie. And Robin Williams, I'd say like at a point in his career where he's just like the hottest thing out there, you can't have a more successful recipe for a movie.
No, and it was based on a book. Not
Right.
that I don't think the
Madam
book was
Doubtfire or something like that.
alias Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
I think.
And the casting for the kids is so good, and they play very rich roles in the movie. They each have their own identity and different kind of relationship with their father, and they have things to do in the movie. They're not just like underplayed as being, oh, it's just the kids. Like, they have rich stories that, and I mean, maybe that's Chris Columbus being Chris Columbus.
Although he didn't write the script.
No. But the directing, I mean, that kind of thing with the wrong director, I feel could not come across nearly as well.
Well, but I think that would have been foolish to do otherwise, because this movie is really so much about the kids and about parenting and how much, even though Daniel is just kind of a screw up in every other area, and he's like a man child, he is a devoted and loving father who, as he puts it, is addicted to his children.
It's true. And what's also pretty interesting about this movie is that the movie opens with him in a recording studio performing multiple voices in a syndicated cartoon show. He is doing well for himself. Like, he in no way is pitched to us as a struggling actor. We do hear that he has a tendency to lose jobs, but it is to get to the point where he is in his career, that's a lot of work.
Well, although and I have to admit, like, there were a few things that I kind of just like looked into, because I was like, he's doing all the characters, and he's kind of doing it after the animation is done, and the animation looks old. So the theory is that he's actually doing like overdubs, or that it's something where like the original audio, like something was messed up on it. I don't know. They don't explain.
We don't know. We don't know that.
But they do say like he's constantly between jobs. Right.
And in the argument that he has with Miranda when she ultimately says that they should get a divorce, it is established that they had this before they had kids and everything. They both were very, they stood up for what they believed in, and they wanted to make sure that like whatever they were doing was like ethical and that they wouldn't sell out, essentially. And something that I've missed in previous viewings of this movie is that real struggle that they're having in their marriage, where she has changed and he is Peter Pan. Anybody? Not as willing to conform. And ultimately, I do feel like Miranda has a point, in saying that they shouldn't be together anymore. And it's true. Sometimes people just, aren't the same people that they were when they first met, and you just have to do what's right. And this was never anything having to do with their kids. And clearly, Daniel was doing things in his career that were good enough to get him. They make his apartment out to be some junky apartment. Do you know how much that apartment would go for right now in San Francisco? It'd be absolutely insane. Like, to have anything with, more than like a studio apartment, like inside San Francisco, I'm sure he was paying a pretty penny. And it's like, they play it up to be this dump. And it's like, that's not that bad.
Although I'm sorry to interrupt, but I feel like it's more considered a dump because it's just like, it's a mess and it's chaos when
Miranda has like the door gets stuck when she's trying to open it, and she has this look on her face, and she turns her nose up at everything, the food that they're eating. And it's like this person has been displaced from his home and is trying really, we don't know the timeline of everything. It seems like things happen really fast in this movie, but we're seeing things from the perspective of Miranda, and they're kind of echoed a little bit by Daniel, and then the caseworker, Mrs. Sellner, they very much play up how dumpy his place is, his lifestyle is, and the only person who can see how much he cares about his kids is himself. And it seems like everyone is so blind to the idea that he truly has the best in mind for his children. Yes, he threw a barnyard birthday party for Chris. That was a bonehead move, but it certainly doesn't mean that he's a degenerate or a bad dad.
Although I would say setting the example of like mom doesn't have to know because mom's not going to be home for 4 hours and we'll get it all cleaned up.
Right. I know that was a selfish move. I agree. But
like, I do think he's a bit oblivious.
Right. And that's the thing is like that he has this big wake up call about cleaning up his act a little bit, but it doesn't mean that he should only have access to them one day a week.
No.
Or need to prove to a court that he can hold down a job in order to get more time with his kids. That is something that I don't think is very realistic. And I get it. It's a movie. I'm not, I totally get that. But I think that there's a lot more to Daniel as a character because the lengths that he clearly is willing to go to in order to just spend time with his children grant the way he did it was wrong. Yes. But it's, they certainly have a history. I mean, Chris was turning 14 or something. And he's the middle child. So it's like, I think they were together 16. Like, I think that Lydia's like 15.
14 years, I think, is the number.
14 years?
I think Lydia's 14. I think Chris is 13 or 12.
Okay.
And then, and actually, I'm glad you brought it up because I think that I thought it was interesting, kind of the ages of the kids and like the 2 back to back and then the 5-year-old. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I guess my thought was, I was like, they've been having problems for some time. Oh God, why can't I remember her name? The Mara Wilson character.
The Mara Wilson character? That's, oh my God. Natalie.
Right. That Natalie was kind of the attempt to
the last ditch effort.
Well, because if you think about it, like if they had Lydia and Chris early in their marriage when they both still had a lot of passion and like that we're on the same page about things, that that might have been, maybe not. I don't know, but I thought that. And I don't know if that's something that's in the book because I've never read the book, but it's very, I think if it's not something that's in the book, I think it's just kind of smart and it's not meant, they don't talk about it, but it's a nice detail. I do still think, I think what's interesting about Daniel as a character is that Daniel does not know how to make things work. When Daniel steps into a character, he can do it because all of a sudden he is like throwing a party, bringing the petting zoo into the house and everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And then he becomes Mrs. Doubtfire. And like you said, we don't know how much time passes. And also like he goes through I would say a trauma,
Sure.
between then and but as Mrs. Doubtfire, like on his first day as Mrs. Doubtfire, he's throwing the TV remote into the fish tank, and you know, all the kids want to do is watch Dick Van Dyke because they're okay, because they probably watched it with him. Another thing that they don't mention, but I'm like, how would these three kids be so into Dick Van Dyke? Well, of course they must have watched it with their father, who would have grown up with it and like definitely would have loved that show. Just one of the best comedies,
you know, Dan,
sitcom comedies. We
see those kids watching, I think, two different programs, the Dick Van Dyke Show and some sort of, 1930s monster movie with somebody with like a clay face or something. Dan, I think they just got what they could get licensed. You know? Well, because I don't think that a lot of 5-year-olds are like, oh yeah, Dick Van Dyke Show. Hell yeah.
I mean, I feel like that there must have been some intention. I mean, this wasn't like, an indie film being made on like maxed out credit cards.
No, these are some of the hottest actors right now. And Chris Columbus.
I mean, Chris Columbus, this was what the last movie he directed before this was what? I don't know, Home Alone?
Yeah.
So like
he's not slumming it, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
No, I feel
anyway.
Yeah, and look, if they wanted it to be like Mama's Family, it would have been Mama's Family.
I'm partially joking, but in reference to that like monster movie that they're watching, it's just like, this is what they're watching? Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was obvious. I felt like that was just to kind of lead into the whole like, oh yeah, Dad's wearing prosthetics.
I know.
Yeah, so but even the same thing is like at the TV studio, it's not until he like steps into the character of a kids show host,
right,
that he's really that Lundy sees him and sees the potential in him as a kids show host.
Yeah.
So
right, and this goes back to something that I was saying a little bit earlier about where he is in his career, and it also ties into him having to really get humbled. But when he first enters that position in the TV studio, where he's told nothing at all before he gets there at what he's doing, he goes like, "Oh, so will I be just like introducing movies, stuff like that?" Like he has this like assumption because he's established as being an actor, and it's just like, oh no, you're shipping stuff. Like he
introduces himself as Daniel Hillard, the actor. Meanwhile, it's basically a temp job.
Oh yeah, it is the bottom of the pile there, and having to really just like start everything from scratch. But anyway, it's a really fascinating study of somebody who really has to reinvent themselves in order to find out like who they really need to be in their life and in their children's lives. And I think that watching it from a different perspective as an adult, and I've watched it as an adult before, but I feel like I haven't watched it with as critical of an eye. And also this is I don't talk about a lot of like personal stuff on the show, but I'm right now in the middle/tail end of going through a divorce myself. It is not a tragedy. My almost 5-year-old child is doing great, and and I am very fortunate to have a solid relationship with her mom, and we are understanding of each other as co-parents, and that's something that Miranda and Daniel didn't have. He definitely mentions the idea of going to couples counseling, and she just says like, no, there's no point. And I think that it's a mentality that I think has changed since the early 90s about, why people would get divorced, and the idea that somebody has to be in the wrong, or, you know, somebody has to be the better parent, because I think that also what comes across in Mrs. Doubtfire is that Miranda is being painted as being this
The heavy,
monster.
as
What's
she
that?
puts it. As she puts
the
it,
heavy.
the heavy.
Yeah. And, you know, there are certainly more opportunities, and it's difficult because also they have her moving on to a new relationship, and she's even interested in this guy before they get divorced. You know, she hears his name and she lights up, and that's before, you know, she finds out about the donkey eating the birthday cake or whatever.
Right. Well, and it's yeah, I mean, well,
yeah.
there's clearly like and I don't know, like they don't talk about it, but it was one thing I wondered was like, had they done couples therapy? I don't get the impression that they had previously, but
no, although I do appreciate that Daniel brings it up as a viable option, and that it's not looked upon in the same way that therapy was looked upon in a lot of other movies from that time, and even a little bit especially a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Where therapy is the butt of a joke.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, Miranda is, I think that there were more opportunities where we could have seen the humanity behind Miranda's character. And we see it a lot in Sally Field's performances when they're in the courtroom at the end, and Daniel's kind of just like pleading for the ability to like see his children, and she sees him for the first time, and she, you know, after they discover that the Mrs. Doubtfire has her own kids show, she goes to the studio, and yeah, they get a little snippy, but she like brings it together, and she really wants to try to figure out a way to make it work because she can tell. And I don't think that enough is done for the character of Miranda to let us see things through her experience fully. We get some really great moments between her and Mrs. Doubtfire, but during those times, you're supposed to be on Mrs. Doubtfire's side.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're hearing her words through Mrs. Doubtfire's ears. And that's something that, like, if Miranda had a scene where she was with a friend of hers, having just any kind of, like, just getting a glimpse into her life without it revolving around, you know, Daniel or Stu, then we could really see like what she's experiencing at this time, because she's got this very busy job where she doesn't get home until 7:00 at night or something. And I don't know, it's definitely not a balanced portrayal. I mean, the movie isn't called Miranda or Mrs. Hillard. It's called Mrs. Doubtfire.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess the idea is to show that basically like if you combined them into one person, they'd be an amazing parent, because you would have the responsible structure, but you would also have the fun, the whimsy, you know, the creativity. You know, but that's not how life works. I agree with you. I think that it does set her up to be unlikable. It sets Stuart up to be unlikable, whereas I think there's only one part where I think he actually is unlikable, and it's at the pool when Mrs. Doubtfire overhears him talking. He's like, oh, he's a loser.
Right. But he also doesn't know him.
No, he doesn't know him, and that's it. But I think that another thing that they could have done, maybe, and they do it. Actually, no, I think they do it pretty well. Is establish that there's a history that predates Daniel between Stuart and Miranda, because otherwise it really doesn't work for her to be getting into a relationship so quickly. I don't think so.
I don't get the impression that they had dated or anything prior to that, but I get the impression that they, you know, were in the same circle and maybe had admiration for each other.
Almost.
Yeah, maybe there was an almost situation.
Maybe if they had dated, if there was an establishment like they had dated, that might have bolstered that a little bit more. But like, yeah, I mean, Stu, right, when you're watching it for the first time, especially if you're a kid, like I watched it with my 8-year-old daughter, and like her afterwards, like I was asking her questions, and her least favorite character easily was Stu.
That's so interesting. He's, he's not doing anything wrong.
You know what she didn't like? His little flip off the diving board.
That flip off the diving board was impressive.
Impressive. A bit show-offy.
Oh, totally show. So,
yeah.
But the thing that we also get from Stuart's conversation with his buddy at the bar that Mrs. Doubtfire overhears is how much he likes the kids. He's crazy about the kids. He's, Mrs. Doubtfire / Daniel doesn't overhear him talking about how he's, got this hot woman who's, finally available or anything like that. He's talking about how much he likes the kids.
What's funny is, sorry to interrupt, when he does talk about Miranda Hillard, it's almost like the other guy should know who she is. And
oh yeah,
it's Miranda Hillard. Like he's dating like Kathy Hilton or something. I don't know why that was the first name that came to my head.
Kathy Hilton. That's
I have no idea why that was the first name that came to my head.
So another thing that I wanted to point out is that something that I like a lot is that Daniel's frustrations with Stuart have way less to do with Miranda than they do with the kids. He is just like, you know what? People move on. He's not fully that way. He's certainly a little miffed, but the fact that he gets to spend time with Daniel's kids, that's what really ticks him off.
Yeah, though when he's talking to Miranda about it, he's always like when she asks him like how long after Mr. Doubtfire died, and he was like, nope, once the father of your children is out of the picture, nope. And he talks about like, waiting till the sheets cool off before inviting another man in. There's some great lines in there.
Yeah, no, but you can tell that like what really gets to him is that Stuart is playing with his children.
And his children like him.
What's that?
And his children, when he walks in, one scene where he walks into the house and Stuart and Miranda are sitting there with the kids like a family.
Yeah.
That you really feel it. Like you just really feel like he's so iced out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also, so there is a scene where Chris discovers that Mrs. Doubtfire is a man.
Chloe's favorite scene.
Oh, I mean, it's a great scene. And he and Lydia are, Daniel reveals that he is himself to Lydia and Chris, and they have this moment. I think that it's what I would have really liked is a little bit more of them in another scene talking, like maybe Natalie's off doing something else and they're just like, hey, so I'm really sorry about this Stuart guy. I know that's got to be really uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like that would let you get away with things more like Lydia and Chris being cool with Mrs. Doubtfire being at like the dinner at the end and stuff, where I feel like Lydia probably should have been like, Mrs. Doubtfire, you know what? If you have plans, do your thing.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, that's gotta suck to sit back and watch that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
but then you wouldn't have the climactic, incredible ending.
Help is on the way. Although, man, he really does try to kill Stuart because Stu's all like, yeah, no, I'm really allergic to pepper.
Yeah. Well, you also have to remember that Daniel was extremely drunk at that point.
Well, oh, yeah. A ton of scotch.
I'm having a whiskey in honor of their dinner.
I was wondering that when you said you were having whiskey. Sorry, I was thinking about what I'm drinking, which is sake. Not at all in honor of that, just because we happen to have some sake left.
Okay.
I appreciate a good sake.
Sake is great.
Yeah. So so Mrs. Doubtfire, lots of great lines in there. So much probably improvised by Robin Williams. The run by fruiting.
Oh my
But
god,
even-
carpe
even-
dentum sees the teeth.
Carpe
like-
dentum. Yes.
yeah, there's so many amazing lines.
When he and just even those he makes all those digs, and like when Stuart's like, oh, your accent's a bit muddled. Oh, well, so is your tan.
Yeah. Oh no, whether it's the script or if it's Robin Williams, the combination of them all, I think that there's a lot to be said about the performance in general. I also want to point out that the screenplay, which is Leslie Dixon and Randy Mayim Singer, two women.
Yep.
Which I think is really cool. I didn't even know that before, and I think that it's pretty awesome. And
I think I'd always just assumed that Chris Columbus wrote the screenplay, and no, yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
And Leslie Dixon was also the screenwriter for Thomas Crown Affair with Pierce Brosnan. So
great movie.
Yeah,
Rene
I watched
Russo.
it recently. Rene Russo is fantastic.
Yeah.
I watched it recently. It's a strange movie.
Have you ever
really
seen the
is.
original?
Yes. It's strange.
I've never seen the original, but I like the remake.
The remake is great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we start talking a little bit more along those lines,
Right.
I have
right.
I have one question for you, Dan.
Yeah.
Why does Mrs. Doubtfire need to wear a bra? Don't you think that the suit was built in a way that maybe that's not necessary?
Like where it
It's
would
an
be
added
built
step.
in.
Well, why does it need to be anything? It's a completely fake. It's a bodysuit.
Which
They're
would-
not natural breasts. They don't function as such.
I mean, they I don't know. Look, who am I? I can't speak to that. I guess if the bodysuit is, if the boobs are saggy on the bodysuit, or maybe it's maybe I don't know. Maybe it's just to have the appearance. Like, what if there's a little? What if a blouse? What if you see through a blouse? Like you'd expect to see a bra strap. I don't
All
know.
of Mrs. Doubtfire's outfits are very tight to the neck to hide the what's behind the seams.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess for funsies, because bras are funny.
I think that just the visual of him having to take off the bra,
probably for that scene where he's going back and forth between being Daniel and Mrs. Doubtfire, because Mrs. Sellner, and then there's the two kids who are watching him.
Those kids are great.
Yes. Yeah.
You could not have picked two better kids to be the neighbors from across the street laughing at him.
Perfect. And the looks on their faces when he sees them is just it's fantastic.
It's a wonderful movie. And Dan, I had to go ahead and make that dumb joke about the bra thing and not just go with the great segue that you had about the word remake. But Dan, what would you do with this movie?
I thought we were going to lead into discussing whether or not it holds up. I thought that's where the bra thing was going. Yeah.
And the answer is yes, it does hold up. But anyway.
To an extent. Yeah.
To an extent.
To an extent. Yes. So there is a Mrs. Doubtfire musical. It just recently closed its Broadway run, and it will be touring the United States and it'll be on the West End if it's not there already in London. Right. And I think that works. I think a musical works for this movie. I was thinking though, I think one of my issues with it has always been like, I don't know. I felt like Daniel Hillard was not as sympathetic a character as, and I think a lot of it, like you said, you pointed out, like the music and the tone of the movie. I think that was what kind of fed into that a bit. And I don't know. So I was trying to think, I was like, how do you make this movie and maybe have your main character, your protagonist, be a little more, I don't know, sympathetic. And the route I went with this is kind of weird. So I went with a loose remake on this.
Okay.
Where the concept is the same, but the story is almost entirely different. So our protagonist is a man. Maybe he was a struggling actor, or not, or someone who was just kind of like, doing these like, odd jobs, but someone not really as successful, financially as his wife. And he, ends up somehow, in prison. I have it as being he is framed for arson.
Okay.
And he's in prison. He goes to prison for like 5 years, and when he's inside, it's kind of like his wife is like, this is not who I thought you were. And she divorces him. She wants nothing more to do with him. He's trying to kind of keep contact, but over the course of his time in prison, it's just like she just kind of cuts off all contact. I was toying with some mafia involvement, not with him, but like with the arson. So because this is where it goes. So he gets out. He's trying to, like, this framing has him set up to be such a criminal. I mean, think similarly to Ant-Man, to Paul Rudd in Ant-Man, but not nearly. I mean, he was actually a thief.
Right.
Our guy here is innocent, and so he gets out. And he's really trying to establish ties with his family, including his 2 kids who haven't seen him now in 5 years, and the daughter that his wife was pregnant with when he was put away. So, that's your Lydia, Chris, and Natty. And so the only way he can establish this relationship is by answering the ad for the housekeeper. And I would set it up where the mother, or the Miranda here, who's an attorney in this version. Miranda has, she's been through just so many different housekeepers, and eventually she's like, I need like a celibate old lady. And she's like, I'm like, I've been through so many. You could have a montage of all. It's kind of like all of the people that Robin Williams pretends to be calling for the job. Like, they actually get hired over the course of those years.
Right.
So, of course, because it's a Mrs. Doubtfire remake, he becomes Mrs. Doubtfire and is trying to build his relationship with his kids as Mrs. Doubtfire, while he's also trying to clear his name. And meanwhile, his wife has kind of started up this little fledgling relationship with another attorney who eventually, and maybe it's like the district attorney or the ADA, and that's eventually Daniel actually has to, when he has like enough evidence to clear his name, he has to go. And of course, because he has all of these, like, whether it's newspaper clippings or like if it's, it's set modern day, he's just got like all these tabs up on his computer with all like the news about the fire. So of course that's where the police Doubtfire was accidental, which is that's the exact headline in the movie. So you'd have he's trying to clear his name and find the people who are actually responsible, and having some type of like mob tie-in there could work, especially if like the Stewart character is a district attorney or assistant district attorney, whatever. I'd say district attorney. Let's go big. And so he eventually has to go to him for help. And I feel like you could still have the climactic dinner at the end, but this time it would be where he's meeting with like it's like a setup where he's meeting with like whoever the person was that like got him involved, that framed him. So it's kind of like he's meeting him and just almost like to say like, you know, look, I've got like maybe he's wearing a wire.
Okay.
And so that adds a complication to it, to that scene, but he ends up drinking because he's so nervous. And, you know, I mean, you could have some similar things happen, but I mean, it's not going to be Robin Williams. So you're not going to make it a Robin Williams movie.
Who would it be?
Oh, you know, Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, I hadn't thought that much about it, but
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, you know, spin the wheel. I don't know. It could be like there's so much talent out there. I mean, maybe Bill Hader.
Okay.
I mean, Bill Hader is great, and you know, love what he does, and we know he's funny. We know he can pull off the drama as well,
and we know that he can pull off wearing different costumes and different looks.
Yes, exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. But like, I don't know. I was kind of more in coming up with this. I was a little, because I mean, of course, the original Mrs. Doubtfire is a vehicle for Robin Williams.
Totally.
Although, you know who else I could have seen doing it at the time? And I know that there were rumors. About Tim Allen and like rumors about it being intended as like a home improvement like spinoff, but no, Martin Short is the only, only other person that I could think of that I was like, in 1993, Martin Short could have pulled this off. Robin Williams is perfect. Robin Williams was perfect.
What year was Clifford? Because that's the
94?
kind of the opposite. Was that 94?
94.
Where he goes 10-year-old boy.
Right. But think about a Martin Short Mrs. Doubtfire, right?
Oh, that would be great.
That would be.
I mean, Robin Williams and Martin Short have like, you know, equally quick wits, and the way that they can pull off those fast jabs and quips, like, yeah, those are the two people, especially at that time. Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. So that's where I don't know. I mean, do you have any casting ideas?
Oh, casting.
I guess for my
for your version, I mean, I could see like the thing is like you have to also picture them as an old lady. So it's like, who could pull something like that off? And it's a weird thing to think about nowadays, because in the 90s, you had movie stars who didn't have to have like great physiques.
Right.
Being an amazing actor who was in leading roles didn't require you to work out. And as
Mrs. Doubtfire clearly shows. And respect, because he's such a dedicated dad. He's got the dad bod.
It's got the dad bod.
Absolutely. Mad
so
respect.
These days, I mean, and that's not to say that everybody right now is, you know, in that type of situation. I mean, not to make any, not that this is in any way a jab at physical appearance, but like somebody like Zach Galifianakis would be, you know, somebody who could pull off a little old lady thing and have it be like really funny and weird, and would still be like, you know, in that age range to be able to do that kind of a thing. Let's see if there's anybody. I'm thinking of people who could pull off a funny like old lady kind of thing without it being so like.
But it would have to be.
I'm a little old lady, you know.
It would have to be believable. I also think for me, this idea, what it does is, because another thing that I think about when I'm watching Mrs. Doubtfire is, how do they not how do they not like, and Sally Field has that one moment where she's like, I feel like I know you. I'm
Yeah.
like, you were married to him for 14 years.
Yeah.
How are you not like, catching it, and you let it go. Like you let it go. You're like, whatever. It's Mrs. Doubtfire. But I'm like, I at least feel that like, all right, you send this guy, and prison changes people. I don't speak from experience here, but this is what I've heard. And, I feel like that kind of can help smooth that little bump in the road over.
Right.
But anyway, no, I don't. Hey, look, if you have got an idea, if you are hearing this idea and you know who you would want to be in this, you can, I'm wondering, I'm trying to think of like age though. I'm like, cause this person would have to be, I guess, in their maybe like late 30s.
Yeah. Early 40s, something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, if you have any ideas, email us ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Let me know who should play the accused arsonist in my Mrs. Doubtfire.
Dan, you mentioned the stage adaptation of Mrs. Doubtfire, but I think that you forgot to include a thread on a TV show that was directly inspired by Mrs. Doubtfire. And that, of course, is from Arrested Development and Mrs. Featherbottom.
Mrs. Featherbottom, right? Combined Mrs. Right, it's the Mrs. Doubtfire plot line.
Yeah.
Yeah, they throw in some Mary Poppins in there, which is interesting because that's what my daughter compared it to when she was watching. Oh, it's like Mary Poppins.
Interesting.
But, okay, so were you going Arrested Development here? Tell me about it.
No. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't go.
Should
through
David
this entire
Cross
episode.
play?
David Cross would be a really interesting one. No, I was thinking not as.
What about Bob Odenkirk?
I think he's a little aged out.
Is he a little too old? Ah, damn it! I'm like, he's
Yeah.
having such a moment.
But he could be the like Stu Dunmire. He could. Maybe like an old college professor or something that Anyway, I don't want to go as dramatic as you were going with the like doing time kind of a thing. But I think comedy. I think that there is opportunity for a light reboot, not necessarily, or a light remake, not necessarily even being called Mrs. Doubtfire, because I think that the name Mrs. Doubtfire carries its own, element of majesty to it, and it is so part of that specific piece of culture. And when I say that, and this is kind of just going off on a little thing right now where it's like, there have been certainly other classic movies where there have been, people remember things so fondly. I'm thinking of movies like RoboCop that had a reboot. But I think that the difference is that RoboCop didn't star somebody who was beloved. Peter Weller's great, but like
all due respect to Peter Weller.
All due respect, but
it wasn't a vehicle for Peter
It
Weller.
wasn't. No, well, it literally was a vehicle for Peter Weller because that suit was,
Yes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, oh wow, a new Peter Weller movie is coming out.
No. And that's what I'm saying is like the name Mrs. Doubtfire, the combination of words doubt and fire, like anywhere near each other is Robin Williams. So I think that there's a way to do it where maybe this takes place in a world where the movie Mrs. Doubtfire actually exists and is, in a way referenced. But like, I think that there's an opportunity to tell a similar story where it's, I'm going to try to piece this together in a way that makes sense. So let's say there's somebody who is going through a divorce where it's understood, where it's just like, okay, this marriage, it's not working. Mutual understanding, they take care of things, but for one reason or another, the process of the divorce somehow separates him from his children. Like, just doesn't get any type of fair custody. And there's just legal red tape all over the place. And maybe there isn't so much of a battle between the people who are getting divorced. Maybe they scheme something up together to work together to get around the legal system. And the way that they do it, and I think that what's so brilliant about Mrs. Doubtfire is that Daniel Hillard is an actor and has the ability to be a character for a prolonged amount of time convincingly. And I think that one of the things that, people think so fondly about when they think of Mrs. Doubtfire is that scene where he has to be himself and Mrs. Doubtfire to Mrs. Sellner when he's got the cake frosting on the face and everything. And I think that it's more engaging to watch him have to fool her than the moments when he's trying to fool the person who's known him for 14 years and having to, I really don't feel like the way that Miranda and Stu are going about their relationship is bothering him as much as the being separated from his children kind of a thing. I feel like that's something that's being pushed on us a little too hard. Mm-hmm. I don't think that it's bad that Stewart exists as a character, but I think that there, deserves to be respect for the ex in this situation. And I would love to see a version where there's like, let's learn from the movie Mrs. Doubtfire to avoid any potential mistakes. Like they look out at like all these other movies or people are, maybe they look at the Dana Carvey movie Master of Disguise. They look at these movies where people are in all these like other.
I'm thinking you're going to go Tootsie.
Tootsie, well, I would say don't get me started on Tootsie, but you did get me started on Tootsie when we did our Tootsie episode. Yeah. Because I feel like Tootsie fails at all of the things that Mrs. Doubtfire does right. And Tootsie, his character is a womanizer, whether he's himself or Dorothy.
Right. He's a much less sympathetic character.
He doesn't learn much throughout his process. He's still a piece of garbage at the very end.
This is true.
So,
love the movie, but yeah,
I got my problems with it. But anyway, I think that there's room for a Mrs. Doubtfire inspired movie, and
it's funny. I was thinking, I was kind of thinking along those lines, but I was like, I did that for Back to the Future. Not as thought out as you did, but kind of like with that same problem of like, how do you do Mrs. Doubtfire when everyone associates it with Robin Williams? Well, and yeah,
you also don't do the old English lady,
right?
You find a different way to do it. Maybe it's trying to do a lot of different types of people. It's other ways to disguise yourself.
Little Master of Disguise inspiration thrown in. Would you have Dana Carvey in this? No.
No, I don't think so.
No.
But I don't know who I would have in it, honestly, because I think that it would require hey, you know what? You said Bill Hader. What about Fred Armisen?
Oh,
Fred Armisen is such a chameleon.
He really is. Wow.
And really could transform into so many different types of people.
Fred Armisen is a great suggestion for either of them, honestly. Yeah. Like, honestly, if anyone is well, like, I can't think of anyone who's better suited.
He might be a little aged
literally
out.
But Fred Armisen is a chameleon in terms of age, so
that's true. That's true. Man, he's so great. Anyway, I think that there's a lot of really interesting ways that you can take this without it ruining anybody's childhoods, and kind of standing on its own, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
Interesting.
What do you got, listeners? ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com.
Yeah, I don't know. What would you do, Mrs. Doubtfire?
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing: is like, love this movie. I loved watching it from the perspective of somebody who is going through a divorce. I have a kid, and an
adorable 5-year-old. Almost 5-year-old.
A precocious 5-year-old, indeed. And here's another thing. I love my daughter, but it's nice to get a break from her every now and then. Because sometimes I want to have a conversation with a grown-up. And it's hard to do.
Yeah. I'm like, I wish I could say I was that addicted. But,
yeah, of course. I mean, he's got Lydia and Chris, who certainly are able to hold a good conversation. But that was just a joke. But
no, absolutely.
All jokes come from somewhere.
I'm glad you said it because I'd thought about it.
Oh yeah, no. I know I can speak for both of us when I say that, like, you know, we love our children, but you know,
absence
you can't
makes
be
the heart grow fonder sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you know what, I'm in in my situation, I have my daughter half the amount of time, and during the times when I don't have her, if it's a longer stretch of time, I look forward to when she comes back, and then like. You know, if I'm with her for a longer stretch of time, by that last morning or whatever, when I drop her off at school, I'm just like, it's going to be nice to like maybe sleep a little bit longer tomorrow, you know, things like that. But, you know, you make the most of the situations that you're in. And for people like Daniel Hillard, sometimes that's not as easy. So you have to figure out how to do it. And hey, I would love it if the actual Mrs. Doubtfire television show is a thing. That looks like a fun show.
That looks great.
It's like Pee-wee's Playhouse, but like a funny old lady.
Yeah, like if it was hosted by Maggie Smith.
You know, that sounds like fun.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So that's our pitch.
All right.
Maggie Smith's Playhouse.
Maggie Smith's. She just throws shade at the kids the whole time. She's just
Conky. What's the word of the day?
Whatever it is you're doing, could you not do it so loud? You watch the
Dan,
new
why don't you tell
Downton
everybody
Abbey.
what we're doing on our next episode?
Oh yeah, because our next episode, Maggie Smith has nothing to do with this movie. We're going back to 1986 because guess what, folks? It's summer, and I'm not sure how crazy this is going to be, but we are going to be talking about One Crazy Summer. Savage Steve Holland directed with John Cusack, Demi Moore, Bobcat Goldthwait.
We got Jeremy Piven in there.
Joel Murray, Jeremy Piven. I feel like I'm definitely leaving somebody out. Niedermeyer from Animal House.
You know, the whiskey's hitting me, so I can't really contribute right now.
No, but anyway, One Crazy Summer. I can't wait to
wait,
watch
did you
that.
say Demi Moore?
I did say Demi Moore.
Okay, you did. Okay.
Should I say it more?
demi more.
Demi
Doesn't
more.
demi mean like
Demi half,
like
half
a
as
little
much?
bit, half
as much? Yeah, demitas.
half more?
Yeah, half more. Anyway,
Well-
yeah, but anyway, it's great, Junkie. It's the follow-up to Better Off Dead, which we've done an episode on. So
Yeah.
excited to jump back into the Savage Steve Holland cinematic universe.
Yeah, people might have seen these movies together in a 2-pack DVD somewhere. I think that's probably something that exists, but probably no behind the scenes edition for this one.
Nope,
Unless you
nope.
count the Godzilla suit.
A Buried in
Anyway.
the Sand edition.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we will talk about it more on the next episode.
Yeah. And Dan, as you board the bus with the horny old bus driver, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.
Euphigenia Doubtfire, dear. I specialize in the education and entertainment of 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 entertainment. Candy and the sun. Could you make me a woman? Showtime. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run daggers for you, daggers for you. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run go pop 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 some neurons. I know you're used to Lucy, din such a sham, it tastes good, such a sham. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run. Surprise. Hip hop, bebop, dance till you drop. Hip hop, bebop doesn't mean that they don't love. Hip hop, bebop, bop bop bop, dance till you drop. Hip hop, bebop. Just a little bit of nicotine. The sun. Just a little bit of nicotine. Cream in your sugar now. A little bit of nicotine doesn't mean that they don't love you.
Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Should've never had a birthday, Dad.
I know you're used to Lucy, but I run daggers for you. When I'm in charge, daggers for you. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run go pop 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 some neurons. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run such a sham, such a sham. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run.
Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Birthday, Dad.
Hip hop, bebop, dance till you drop. Hip hop, bebop doesn't mean that they don't love. Hip hop, bebop, bop bop bop, dance till you drop. Hip hop, bebop, bum 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 bum. Just a little bit of nicotine. The sun. Just a little bit of nicotine. Cream in your sugar now. A little bit of nicotine. Din doesn't mean that they don't love you. When I'm in charge, don't fuss with me. It tastes good, din. It tastes good, bum 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 bum.
Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Birthday, Dad.
I know you're used to Lucy, but I run such a sham, such a sham. I'm in charge. I know you're used to Lucy, but I run.
Should've never had a birthday, Dad. Birthday, Dad. Dad. Birthday, Dad.
Hip hop, bebop, dance till you drop. Hip hop, bebop, mean that they don't love. Hip hop, bebop, bop bop bop, dance till you drop. Hip hop, bebop, candy in the sun. Just a little bit of nicotine. Din. Just a little bit of nicotine. Cream in your sugar now. A little bit of nicotine doesn't mean that they don't love you. Well, that's all for today. Bye bye.